Okay, so we got both mics on. And, hashtags, Wi-Fi. I think we're all set then. Okay, so Majid, thank you very much for coming tonight. It's been great to get to know you a little bit over the last couple of months since you first came to our meetup. But really, this is a chance to kind of dive into a little more depth. So, would love to hear. Maybe just start off. Just tell us a little bit about your life growing up here in the UAE. A little bit about your family, and just kind of all the changes you must have seen in your time here.
Well, first of all, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for having me here, Bern. It's an absolute pleasure. Let me start by sharing a little bit about my childhood. So, growing up, I was very fortunate to have both my parents kind of drive me to excel in education. But what my mother focused on is she wanted to ensure that I had ample supply of reading books growing up. So, Bern, I think if I would describe my first years or early childhood, I did read a lot, relatively speaking. That definitely helped me cultivate an inquisitive mind, I think, and that trait, a personal trait, kind of grew with me as I grew older. And then graduating from high school, I really wanted to experience something new, and this is where I decided to go on an adventure and basically travel abroad for my university and basically do my bachelor's in the United States. And that was an amazing experience. It was challenging, it was difficult. However, looking back, I definitely would do it again and again. I think independence is a key gain, a personal gain for me from studying abroad. But also, I think studying in the United States was also a very interesting aspect in my development as a person. I think the entrepreneurial spirit is very prevalent. Specifically, I mean, with my peers, I think in college they were super excited about starting their own businesses and doing their own thing. Now, to me, that sounded like an interesting concept, but basically working in the UAE, you probably work for the government some way or another, especially in Abu Dhabi. So it was an interesting concept that after graduating, I think developed further and further. And I think that's, in a nutshell, kind of explains my journey up to...
Okay, no, that's great. Thank you very much. So I'm guessing that you had your choice of lots of different colleges, both in the U.S. and elsewhere. I know that since then you've actually had a chance to do quite a bit of travel as well, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But was there any particular reason, anything that drew you to Arizona, to chemical engineering? Were there things that you said, that's the place for me?
Well, chemical engineering is simple, right? I was an ADNOC scholar, so in high school I had high grades, and then I earned my scholarship with ADNOC, and I wanted a field that was flexible in a sense that chemical engineering, you would be eligible to work in any of ADNOC's company. By the way, ADNOC is the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company. It's a major oil company here in Abu Dhabi and in the UAE. And chemical engineering also had a renewable energy aspect to it, which was something very interesting. Back then, my capstone project was a 5 megawatt power plant, solar power plant. So it's not irrelevant. Back then, it was a university project. Now we do actually see projects up and running. Not there yet in terms of economics, but we're getting there.
Interesting.
And Arizona, it's close to the weather here, I guess.
Yeah.
Not as humid, but
not as humid.
Yeah, it gets it.
Well, now one thing that fascinates those of us who didn't grow up here, of course, is that the country, the UAE, is still so young. It's got such an exciting air of change and looking toward the future. And I just wonder if you could just share with us a little bit about some of the changes you've seen, and I'm sure others in the room too that have been here for a long time.
One thing I've learned is change is constant. So, and this is evident and prevalent in the UAE. Change is always happening. It's so fast that you kind of get used to it. Now that has positives and pros and cons, basically. But really, I think that gels well into the spirit of entrepreneurialism. I think that makes you want to create new things, build new things, because you see it in front of you. I remember, going to the States and then coming back. I did come on, not so short intervals, but I could see change in front of me, and positive change, I'd say. Mm-hmm. And I think that had an impact on the culture, but also on how people perceive change. It's a welcome thing. It sometimes is scary, but I think once you embrace it, it's a progressive thing, and it's a move forward. So I think a lot of young Emiratis, I can see that in them.
That's great. There's a wonderful book called The History of Future Cities, and they talk about Mumbai, St. Petersburg, I think Shanghai and Dubai, not Abu Dhabi, but sort of saying that each city in its time reimagined urban living. And I think that, to me, one of the exciting things about the UAE and Abu Dhabi is that really you can reimagine everything from the ground up, which is really quite amazing.
Absolutely.
Well, so now we've gone through sort of university, and there, I'm sure, a lot of other stories that we haven't gotten to, maybe after the session. But then you also did some more training in Cambridge, didn't you? You did
right.
some. Can you tell us about that and
absolutely,
sort of your
absolutely.
experience in the UK?
That was mostly done in Abu Dhabi.
Mm-hmm.
I think there it was a diploma in leadership, and I think I was always fascinated with leadership. The notion of a small group or an individual that can shape a vision and have people follow him towards that vision, building, creating new things, that was a fascinating notion.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you look at the person from the outside, he is just a normal human being, but then he possesses certain aspects, right, that he's able to share his vision clearly, but also have buy-in from people. So I wanted to study that phenomenon better, more, and this is why I've done my diploma in leadership, and it definitely helped me know myself better. I think leadership is not one thing; it's many different things, and each and every individual has some leadership aspects in them and has a leadership style that I believe each and every one of us, to maximize the value in society, needs to connect with the type of leader he is and then act on that.
Okay, great. Now we're just getting to some of the interesting stuff here, because so you're an ADNOC scholar, you studied chemical engineering. So far it seems kind of like a normal, no surprise sort of career. Then you went to work for Gasco in oil and gas. And can you tell us a little bit about that?
So Gasco is a subsidiary of ADNOC, right? So it focuses on oil and gas. And it was a very interesting experience there, because I was fortunate to have a very supportive boss, right? So after working for some time in the field, turning valves and making sure the pressure is all right, and making sure not too much sulfur gets to Abu Dhabi, I started asking questions. Why are the plants designed in a certain size, in a certain capacity? Abu Dhabi was growing, right? The UAE was growing. But then we had to constantly debottleneck, which is basically expand the capacity, right? So we had to do a lot of debottlenecking in the plant. And then we also were building new plants. So I always asked myself, why weren't the plants designed bigger to kind of anticipate the growth? Obviously, that's easier said than done. So I asked my boss that question, and then I've decided, you know what, maybe I can go to the strategy team, right, where they kind of design and decide on the requirements and coordinate with other we call them opcos, operating companies. And then there is really the say a tipping point or changing point in my career where being in the strategy unit in Gasco, I got exposed to business development opportunities. We've created a joint venture basically with a German counterpart. We created a joint venture between ADNOC and a German counterpart. And there, in that activity, I just discovered that I'm really passionate about finance, deal making, investments, and I wanted to pursue that career further. Gasco was not the place. I had an amazing experience, very supportive bosses.
But then you kind of opened your eyes to it.
Absolutely. I mean, and then I fell in love and I just went after it.
Great. So then you went to GE Capital and eventually Mubadala. Can you share with us some of the evolution there and kind of how your career moved there?
So wanting to do more financial stuff, I had to shift to another type of company versus an operating company. Then I kind of got exposed, learned about Mubadala. So I've joined Mubadala, and then after doing some, again, leadership training with Mubadala as you get in, then at that time, Mubadala was working on a deal with GE, specifically GE Capital. We have a guest here, small guest. So Mubadala GE Capital was set up as a joint venture between Mubadala and GE Capital. So I was the first UAE national to join that joint venture. And I was really very fortunate to be there day one. I also joined a leadership program, a GE leadership program, the risk management leadership program. It's basically a 2-year program where you get put into different roles in the organization to get exposed to different experiences and therefore expediting your basically career within GE. And then another interesting unit or division came up in Mubadala, which is Mubadala Capital. And I was again excited about that, joining that. It was in the beginning, initial days of that unit or that division, and it was mainly dealing with public equities. Again, something super exciting, super interesting, and I decided to join it, and I did.
And can you just say a few words for those who aren't familiar with Mubadala?
Right.
Sort of what the structure is and what its mandate is.
So Mubadala is a development company. What that means, it's not. A lot of people characterize Mubadala as a sovereign wealth fund. We, and I say we, referring to myself as a Mubadala employee, we call it a development company. Basically, it's developing actual projects here in Abu Dhabi in collaboration, joint ventures, in collaboration with other international partners. And I think it's one of the bigger players in Abu Dhabi in terms of setting up plants. They're into aerospace, they're into aluminum and metals, they're into healthcare, they're into real estate.
Semiconductors.
Absolutely. One of their bigger projects is the Cleveland Clinic in Mari Island. It's an amazing, I think it's an amazing feat, an amazing project. And these kind of projects are what Mubadala is all about, really. Talking about catalysts, I think Mubadala builds these projects to become catalysts for future development of the ecosystems around those mega investments, basically, in Abu Dhabi. Obviously, Mubadala GE Capital was a very interesting joint venture. It's basically so it has two elements into it. It has the commercial lending arm and it has the investment arm. What Mubadala wanted to do through GE Capital is to bring the GE Capital origination and risk management to Abu Dhabi in terms of having a the GE basically credit underwriting process introduced to the region and to Abu Dhabi specifically. And that was I think when I joined them, it was in 2010 basically. So it's been some time now.
So it's after the 2008 sort of financial recession and hiccup around the world, but a lot more scrutiny and transparency,
Absolutely.
that sort of thing. Interesting. It seems to me that one of the most interesting things about your time there must have been to pick up some of the skills of portfolio management, trying to judge, and this comes, we'll touch on this with your later career, but trying to judge what's a good bet, what's not. How do you manage risk? How do you assign at least a tentative valuation to a company or to a startup?
Right. So, excuse me. So in terms of mitigating risks, first of all, you need to acknowledge risks, right? You shouldn't say there's nothing there. First of all is you have to acknowledge and understand the risks, and then you have to find mitigants for them. I remember from my days in GE, I don't think we have done a deal with no risk. There was always risk involved, and that's why you get paid the premium, right, to take on risk. But then also, we always had a structured approach in terms of building our financial models, having best case, base case, and then the worst case scenario, where the covenants were going to be tested. And I'm probably using too much financial jargon, but basically we wanted to make sure that the company that we lend to did not default on our loans, right? And to do that, we wanted to project basically their revenues and their costs. And we wanted to make sure that, given their current state of operations, they could still service our debt. And even if things got bad, we still have some cushion or some collateral to support ourselves. Now that's very high level describing the way I personally look at risk and risk management. And that's based on my experience with GE. Now in terms of valuation and investments, I think this is where Mubadala capital comes into place. I mean, there are many different ways to value a company, right? You have the multiples, you have discounted cash flows, you have all these metrics. But what I found the most important aspect in valuation is the management of the company. And that's the hardest thing to put value on.
Yeah.
Right? You can do, especially in public equity, right? Basically, you can do all the math you want. You can model it to a certain extent, and you can get there plus minus 5%, 10%, whatever, right? But then you need to understand that the management would do the right thing for you, the shareholder. And that's by meeting them and talking to them and understanding, what their views are. How do they view the company, the competition, the industry? All of these kind of help you form an opinion. So I think these are the two aspects when looking at investments. You definitely should consider valuations, but also you should also consider your worst case scenario, which sometimes get lost.
Unfortunately, yeah. And did you notice any changes or differences between public sector and private sector attitudes toward risk or toward investments, or were they both using similar sets of metrics?
So I think it's a bit different. With private, you have sometimes so you have access to data rooms, so you have as much information as you think you need, right? But also then with private, you have some sort of leverage on the companies to a certain extent. If you're co-invested, so you have some leverage there. In public equities, you don't have that leverage, but all the information is in the public. So again, it goes back to management, I believe.
Okay, that's interesting. How about the difference between large companies and small? So imagine that in your time there, you saw a whole range of companies, some of them maybe not quite as small, some of the startups that are in this room, but early stage, others certainly giants in their field. Was there a different approach to those, or could you use some of the same tools to look at both kinds of all sizes of companies?
So you can use similar tools, but I think the discount factors are different.
Okay.
So that's factoring some risk.
Yeah.
But if I wanted to share something that small companies can learn from large companies is, and this is key, right? If you promise your investors something, please make sure you deliver. Big or small, that's how you build a relationship with your investors. And this is what I found. I mean, with bigger companies, it's harder to slip, but they do slip, right? Well, it's more prevalent with smaller companies. I found it's not the case. It's not a rule or a. But that's what I would definitely, if I wanted to advise a growing company, is just make sure if you promise something, please deliver. So always, we shared under promise and over deliver.
Right. So I guess there's technical risk, business risk, market risk, all sorts of things. But by under promising and over delivering, hopefully you can give yourself a buffer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, now, I think during most of the discussions so far, we've had sort of your private hat on. But I think our audience is certainly aware that in your role, the Technology Development Committee, you also have a public hat. And I wonder if we could just switch for just a few minutes.
Absolutely.
If you could tell us a little bit about some of the government initiatives, things that either people here should be aware of or might want to learn more about in terms of Khalifa Fund, other types of mechanisms, government initiatives such as the Innovator Program. We'd love to hear more about that.
Absolutely. And thank you for this, Bern. I think it's very important to share the message here that 2015 is the year of innovation in the UAE, and that obviously means many different things to many people. We at the Technology Development Committee really focus on developing the human capital here in Abu Dhabi and the UAE in general. And we believe maybe I should take a step back and share a little bit about TDC. Technology Development Committee was set up in 2009, obviously with the aim of supporting and encouraging technology-related industries and the build towards a knowledge-based economy in line with the Abu Dhabi 2030 vision. And we've done a lot of work in terms of identifying what areas need to be tackled in Abu Dhabi to get to that vision. And we found that really human capital is at the core of the development needs of Abu Dhabi. Hence, we have designed multiple initiatives to focus on human capital development in Abu Dhabi, and it's segmented by age group. The program I'm running is the Innovator Program. It targets 13 and above, and it really goes all the way to, we had people like 61-year-old participate in our events. And that tells you how wide our basically target audience. But the core of that is 15 to 25. The Innovator Program is a multi-component program that focuses on embedding the culture of innovation into the community, right? So the four components are, or the program, the Innovator Space, which is a 1,000 square meter maker space, basically. An open facility with equipment that you can use to manufacture anything out of metal, plastic, wood, electronic circuits, and textiles. Obviously, it's membership based, and we have a staff there to support you, basically build your projects and turn your ideas into a reality.
And where's that based?
It's going to be based in Al Zain Raha Beach in Abu Dhabi, and we're opening soon. Actually, in a couple of 3 to 4 months from now, we're going to open, and inshallah we'll see all of you there. The other component is the Innovator Show, which is an annual event that happens every year in March. We have had our second edition this year, last March in the Corniche. We had an amazing turnout this year. We had 8,000 visitors, and it was a 2-day event. And we had people exhibit from all 7 Emirates. We had participants as young as 12-year-old come and participate.
It was great to see the whole range, right? Some of them were very professional, some were from universities or industry, others were from high school, and sort of creating little models out of Lego or whatever to very high-tech drones. It was really amazing.
And that's exactly what we're trying to bring out, right? We're trying to bring out your inner child, your creative side. We want people to start building prototypes, and I'm using the word prototype, but building your toy basically, right? And just sharing it with people. So the participants that come to us have more or less finished prototypes. Obviously, we help them with the final touch-up, but what we emphasize on them is how do you present your prototypes to the public?
Mm-hmm.
That's a key, I believe, a key skill that they need to learn. Right?
And it's great to see these kids because they were so excited to be able to present something to strangers who would come up and
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the joy in their eyes is priceless.
Yeah.
I mean, next year, in March of next year, again, we'd hope to see all of you there. And as you said, you have the professionals, you have cutting edge technology, and you have just kids playing with Lego and robots, and they all share the same passion. They've created something and they want to share their story with you. The third component is basically a tour or an outreach program. Basically, in that program, and we've conducted a pilot and it was extremely successful. What we want to do is take skill-based workshops to schools and universities. So again, 15 to 25. Basically, we want them to get less intimidated by technology, especially advanced manufacturing technologies, such as 3D printing, laser cutting, soldering, some some light programming, not too heavy. Basically, to get them started with, okay, what can I do with a 3D printer? What can I do with a laser cutter? How can I solder things together?
Cool, yeah.
And we are targeting 10,000 students. I call them students loosely. We definitely have people from, that are professionals that come and join these workshops as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the final component is a magazine. Basically, the magazine is there to connect the community together. But the magazine is happening in 2016. So you can see this is a comprehensive program.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a space, it's not just an event.
No.
It's just building this kind of momentum, creating this critical mass around specifically making, but hopefully we can transfer them into becoming entrepreneurs and pro makers as a word.
Well, it seems like it ties back to your earlier comment about human capital building, that really for both locals and also for expats who are coming here but want to grow in a new direction or whatever, it's creating something that maybe hopefully will be long-term, more sustainable than just sort of a flash in the pan.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Interesting. Do you want to say a little bit more about the new space that you're creating? And because I know it's a pet project and it's going to be very exciting to see that unfold. The innovator, the tech shop, the makerspace.
So, so we started the fit-out work for the space, and it's in partnership with Tech Shop. Basically, Tech Shop is a leader in makerspace operations. It's a US-based company, but they're expanding globally, and we're bringing them here to Abu Dhabi. And basically, they're coming to operate the space for us. And it's a very interesting and exciting project because it's a startup, right? I have to go through hiring the team, checking the designs of the space, the fit out, doing the marketing strategy, pricing. So
he feels your pain right now.
it's very, but it's very rewarding.
Yeah.
After you figure out how much you should charge for membership, what's the right number, and building in all the kind of promotions and support mechanisms that you want to put in place. It's fun, it's amazing to see something. I think with entrepreneurship is, once you see the project done in front of you, or at least the first milestone, you forget all the sweat, tears, and pain. It's just in front of you.
Yeah. It seems to me one of the most valuable things that you bring to the table too is that you've had a chance to see entrepreneurial activities in other countries, and I think you talked to me about earlier about sort of getting a mental picture of what a makerspace or do-it-yourself place could look like and elsewhere. I wonder if you could just say a few more words about, what does it take to kind of get that inside of the heads of all these 10,000 students that you're going to be?
Well, that's a challenging part. That's a challenging piece, right?
Yeah.
And I think, first of all, we had conducted, as you alluded to, Bern, like a lot of extensive research into how these communities work, how these spaces work, and how they interact with each other, and what are the key success factors, basically, for such to start an ecosystem, right? That's a very big word, right? So we definitely, I think, visiting such places and feeling the energy is priceless. I think, no matter how hard I show you videos, slides, it's just being there give you the idea. And I think what we're trying to do here is, with the core team that we have for our space, is we're sending them to the United States to get the kind of cultural training, right? And that's important. I think, obviously, we want that maker culture. Obviously, we want to have our own identity, no doubt. And this is why there are people from here that are going there and learning more about what the maker movement is and what the maker culture is, and then bringing that back, but also with a twist. So that's the important piece. I think it's getting the right attitude across, and this is what we hope to do with this select group of individuals that we have as a core team, but also with this initiative. Right? That's the key element here, is the mindset shift. Interesting.
Now, in this room, there's, as I mentioned before, a wide range of people. Some are very seasoned entrepreneurs. Others are just starting out. Some were born here or grew up here. Others are brand new here. Can you give some advice for people who want to engage more with either government agencies or with some of these innovation efforts, if they want to somehow either be part of it, to teach, to maybe benefit from it, to look for funding? What are some of the ways that they can get involved with some of these?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I'm here, so you can easily reach out to me. You should try hard, but you definitely can get through. Persistence is a key trait of entrepreneurs.
It's a test,
right? Absolutely. But no, reach out, right? Reach out and make yourself heard. That's very important. There are many different initiatives. There is the Khalifa Fund, there is Ibtikari, there is what we're doing, the Innovator Program. There are institutions like NYU who are gracefully hosting us tonight. There are a lot of people that are willing to help. It's just finding the right people. And I think that's also, and Flat 6 Lab, obviously. Absolutely. That's the most important piece of the ecosystem, right?
Shout out to Ramsey and to Nina there. Yeah.
Absolutely. Just go and speak to people. I mean, like, reach out. And trust me, you won't have a one-stop shop. Not yet. But having said that, it's a nascent ecosystem. A lot of people do want to help. The government does want to help in setting up programs. But again, each entrepreneur is unique, and the requirements are unique. So I think it takes time. It takes a lot of education from both sides, but we'll eventually get there. So I encourage you to reach out. Obviously, entrepreneurship is key for the government, and that's obvious. In this this year, you can see the amount of projects that have been announced publicly.
It's amazing. Mars mission, all these
absolutely
incubators, accelerators.
This is all about encouraging entrepreneurialism and I mean, look, my definition of entrepreneurship, Bern, is people who are trying to solve big problems and along the way make some money. I can kind of differentiate them to business owners that are there to start up a business and generate income, which is something very encouraged as well here in the UAE. But I think as an entrepreneur, really you need to be tenacious. You have to have persistence. You have to, really believe in what you're working towards, and then people will come and support you. And I've seen that time and again. I mean, with the meetup, with a lot of the activities and initiatives that happen here in Abu Dhabi specifically, people would come and join you.
That's great advice.
Reach out.
Yeah. Now, growing up in this area and spending a lot of time here, I wonder if you could share with us some perspectives on other regional efforts that you've seen to encourage entrepreneurial activities, some of the things that are going on either in Africa or in the Levant or in the GCC. Are there sort of examples that you would point to that people are doing some interesting things?
Absolutely. I mean, so a lot of the public policy that's coming out in the region are in response to needs, I would say. And there are interesting examples. There is a very interesting example in Saudi, an initiative called Takamul, which is very similar to an initiative that TDC has called Takamul. But there are two different initiatives, and maybe I can touch on our Takamul as well. But the Saudi Takamul is basically an initiative to support early stage and seed stage VCs or investors. Basically, it's a government matching program in a way. That's a very interesting program, and I urge anyone who's interested to go and learn more about it. They have a lot of material online. The other interesting example is also a similar matching program that the central bank in Lebanon conducts, and has been very successful in starting or spurring entrepreneurship in Lebanon. So there are a lot of programs, and I think a lot of the, developing countries are getting more and more aware about the importance of supporting entrepreneurialism. I think it's a key driver for job creation, for value creation, increasing the GDP, and these are all things that public policy, but governments are really working towards. And I want to also talk about the public policy programs that we are providing at TDC as well. So Innovator Program is one of the programs. The other program that we also, amongst others, obviously, is Takamul. Takamul is basically a patent registration program. So what we do, we have two goals in that program. A, raise awareness around patents and intellectual property. And then the second goal is to increase the IP output from the UAE.
Great.
And we do help legal advice. We provide funding as well. It's for UAE nationals, companies, and academic institutions, all 7 Emirates. So we have a very good track record. We've seen a lot of growth. Before we started the program, 7 patents were granted from the UAE.
7.
7, right. And now we're in the 4th year, and we've helped file 45 patents.
That's great.
And the growth rate is phenomenal. So we're doing a lot there in terms of increasing the awareness around how do you file, what concept, should you have a patent or should you have a copyright or should you have a trade secret, for example. So there are a lot of things that entrepreneurs and inventors alike can benefit from.
Sounds like you're really raising awareness, both in terms of information, but also creating a new norm, a new mentality.
Absolutely.
Like I should try to look for IP in order to make my startup or enterprise or whatever that much stronger.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting. Okay. I remember an earlier conversation we had one time about an iHub in Nairobi. And everybody knows the examples of accelerators and incubators and Y Combinator in San Francisco or London or whatever. But it seems like there's some very interesting examples of other things going on in developing countries as well.
And the iHub came into light after President Obama delivered his speech there a few weeks ago, right? And I think that was an interesting model for us to look at. I think with the the regulations, the maturity of the markets, it's similar, right? And we wanted to see what the people at iHub Nairobi were doing in terms of programs to spur entrepreneurship. And they had a very interesting model where it was mostly a co-working space, but they had add-on activities. And they are very successful. They are always fully booked. They have a tiered program where you enter at one level, and then if you're good enough as an entrepreneur, you grow basically to become the second level, and they have them colored, right? Black, red, and green. But then that's kind of it's competitive, but also it kind of a distilling mechanism. It's like a funnel mechanism where at the end you really have a natural selection process for entrepreneurs that can give you the right startups for the ecosystem, and then these kind of give back to the ecosystem, and then this is how you have it. It's a very interesting model, really.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's great. Thank you. Now, we've talked a lot about founders, and I wonder if the other side of the equation is the funders. And I wonder if you could say just a bit about your perception of the investors here, the investment community, angels versus VCs, just kind of, for those in the audience who maybe haven't had a chance to interface too much with the investor community here.
Right.
Any observations?
So, Abu Dhabi has a lot of money, right?
It's known to have some. Yes.
Absolutely, some. I think that's the perception there is the availability of money is different than deploying money. And I think a lot of education is required, and as entrepreneurs, it's not that don't get kind of bogged down by people not understanding, how your valuation works, or why am I not seeing a lot of investors piling on my idea? It's a great idea. Actually, we've seen a few examples where startups from this region try to raise capital here in the UAE. They're not as successful as they are when they go to the United States and Silicon Valley, right? They ask for a valuation, they can't get it here. They get double the valuation in Silicon Valley.
Oh, yeah, it's a big difference.
And it's not lack of capital; it's lack of understanding. And I think this is about to change and obviously entrepreneurs, again, have a very important role in doing that. Right? You need to explain. If someone is used to, and the other thing is, there are ample investment opportunities here. So, would I invest? And I'm just using real estate as an example. It doesn't mean anything, but would I invest in real estate and get double-digit IRR, or would I invest in a startup and get double-digit IRR? Right.
One is more tried and true. It's a bit lower risk, at least perception of lower risk.
Absolutely. We'll see about that in the next few weeks. But it's absolutely less perceived as less risky than a startup, where I don't know what the projected cash flows are going to look like. What's the discount rate to apply? Why am I using a sales multiple versus an earnings multiple? All are different. It's a different metric. So
some startups are actually trying to create a market, so there's no way to even judge.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think if I were to think about how to tackle this issue, I think angel investing, angel clubs, are a must start to socialize. We have wealthy individuals here that would probably invest in your startup, but not just for financial reasons. If they believe in
social impact,
if you believe in your product, if you believe in you, if they want to support you, if they see the value of your product. So I think that would help the equation. Now, obviously, once we start seeing an uptick in the pipeline of startups, then you would. It's a chicken egg problem.
Right. If you see a couple of exits, then people sort of realize, this is something that could actually work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think certainly, to invest in a software, social media, e-commerce, or biotech startup seems not quite the norm here yet. And
Yes.
part is because you mentioned a very important word earlier of ecosystem. We don't quite yet have that sort of well-oiled machine where you've got all the parts working together. The investors, service providers, attorneys, people willing to take deferred fees or equity, that sort of thing. But hopefully someday. Yeah.
Inshallah. Like I would look forward for the day when I tell an investor you have 6 million unique users. Who say, wow, that's an interesting investment opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
When I talk to them about how many eyeballs, and like,
Yeah.
people would understand that. Now it's just it's the typical investment products, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to leave some time for questions. I know we're getting toward the bottom of the hour, but I wonder, Majid, if you have any sort of last words of wisdom, other observations, things that we didn't touch on that you wanted to mention, because I think the audience here is just looking at the body language. I think they're very eager to hear. It's a very unusual opportunity to have you here.
So, I mean, words of wisdom is a very big word, but I can share some lessons basically. Dream big, right? But be humble. So you might think that you have the best idea in the world, but talk to your customers. Like, understand, is that their perception as well? The other thing is really follow your heart, but consult your mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, by all means. I mean, life would be so boring if you didn't. However, do the math, right? Does it add up?
Mm-hmm.
Would you be able to pay the bills at the end of the month or not, right? If you would be able to do that, then by all means, go for it. And one last thing about, I think, about entrepreneurs, or a couple of quotes. Entrepreneurs are people who are willing to work 80 hours, not to work 40 hours, right?
Yeah.
And then you would want to work 8 hours for salary, 10 hours for a good boss, but 24 hours for a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
So find that idea and just, again, go after it. And these are the final words that I want to share with the
That's
crowd.
great. That's great. Thanks very much, Majid. I think let's open it up to questions. I think we have a microphone in the back, and Robin's got the mic. If anybody has any questions, it's really a great opportunity to ask Majid to weigh in.
Thank you for sharing your advice and stuff with us. I just wanted to know, I mean, in terms of building the ecosystem, we've talked about the founders, we've talked about the investors. How about the next step, the implementation, the employees? I mean, how are you thinking about creating the ecosystem, for example, the mobility of people? I mean, the one thing that stands out in Silicon Valley is that, you have an opportunity that 10 different companies that are ready to take you on. So if you raise up your hand and say, look, I'm an expert in this, there are 10 different companies that take you on, and that's why it attracts the best of talent.
Right.
I mean, is there any program that you're undertaking where you attract the best of talent, not just the founders and investors, but the ecosystem, the development of the ecosystem?
Well, thank you for your question. I think you touch on a very important aspect, which is regulations here in the UAE. And I agree with you. There is a lot of room for growth there. But obviously, I think the way we're looking at developing the ecosystem is that we need to see any kind of program that you want to introduce, any kind of service that you want to introduce, you want to see that there is critical mass to use that service or new regulations that you're going to introduce. So what we are looking for now is a critical mass of entrepreneurs here in the ecosystem to help us justify any type of service that we want to offer, any type of regulation that we want to introduce. And from my perspective, we are getting there. So once we get there, obviously a lot of changes would happen. I mean, look at the programs that have been introduced over the last few years. They're all there to support entrepreneurs. And in building the ecosystem, you have many different components. You have government, you have education or academia, you have investors, but the most important piece are the entrepreneurs. And we want the entrepreneurs to come and kind of tell us, like, we need this, we need that. We don't want like single cases, right? Which is also valid, but for us to invest in such services, we need critical mass.
Kevi, was there another aspect of mobility that you were talking about, or is it?
I think we covered it.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. Other questions, comments? Dia in front. And maybe just say a word about who you are too. And introduce yourself. And
My name is Dia. I am from Haikal Media, a publishing company. My question is, if you had a magical power to change something in the startup ecosystem, like right now, what would it be? In the Arab region, I'm talking.
Interesting. That's a very interesting question, Dia. Thank you so much. I think if I had not a magic power, but a magic potion to give to entrepreneurs to become more courageous and kind of follow their dreams, then I would definitely give it away. I think we have a lot of entrepreneurs in the Arab region. It's just by nature. I mean, look at this country. It's basically a startup, right? We created a country here 43 years ago, and we're building it. So we have a lot of entrepreneurial spirit in the Arab world. It's just we want the entrepreneurs to kind of own that, and be responsible, be courageous, and then kind of make yourself heard. Basically, that's what I would really ask the entrepreneurs here to do.
great. Ramsey.
Hey guys, my name is Ramsey from Flat 6 Labs. A question for you, Majid and Byrne. If you could see one element that would help alleviate the fear of failure in the region and with entrepreneurs here, what would it be, you think?
Right. So I think, Ramsey, and that's a very important question. I think you really are discussing a very important point. I think it's the other side of what I just said. It's the fear of failure. And there is a stigma here in the Arab world specifically about, failure is not an option. And that notion has to be changed. And I think the way to do it is to start with a safe environment, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a little bit counterintuitive having the entrepreneurs in a closed environment because they're mostly not that type. But I think it's having them go through the experience. And I stress the word experience, not failure, right? Having them go through the experience 1 or 2 times, and then they'll be, I won't say be used to failure, but be used to describing failure as experience.
Mm-hmm.
But my view, the way to do it here is to start within a small group in a safe environment. I think like what you guys are doing at Flash 6, right? That's an amazing experiment, I would say.
And I would build on that, if I may, that I think part of the safe environment that Matt is talking about could be to sort of create an environment where maybe you have a little more leeway if you lose a job. You don't have to leave in 30 days, for example. For expats, it feels very unsafe to do something on my own because if I do fail, I might have to leave very quickly. Whereas if I had a little bit more time and ability to stay and try again or to try in a different way, it seems like that could be one very tactical way to encourage that take away some of the sting of the failure.
Absolutely.
Great. Other questions, comments? Okay, well, please join me in thanking Majid. We gave him a rousing round of applause in the beginning. I think he definitely lived up to it. Thank you very much for your comments.